Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bishop David Walkowiak. I'm the bishop of the Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids, which covers 11 counties in West Michigan. And I welcome you to this very, very important presentation entitled The Hidden Holocaust. Before I go any further, though, on behalf of my fellow Catholics in West Michigan, I would like to express my sympathy and prayers to those of you who are members of the Jewish community for what has happened in Pittsburgh. Perhaps one of the most deadly incidents of anti-Semitism in our country. The scourge of religious violence and violence in general is something that just makes us very discouraged here in the United States. This is a terrible example of anti-Semitism. It's a terrible example of what is happening repeatedly in our country. Even this week, we can scan the headlines and learn about mail bombings, sent to prominent individuals. We can hear of a man who tried to break into an African-American church and could not go in, so he went to a supermarket and shot a number of Afro-Americans. So this is something that is happening. It's not diminishing, and that's very much true also of anti-Semitism. We recall the number of Jews who lost their lives in Paris a couple of years ago. And we wonder, why is this violent hatred, on the rise? And what can we do to push back against it? That is why I think studies such as Reverend Patrick Desbois are so important, because he and his co-workers are shedding light on an area of the Holocaust that is not that well explored. Thank God we have the Holocaust Museum in Washington. That is a tremendously moving experience for anyone who goes there. And it's important to keep the Holocaust and what can happen to the human heart, to have those kind of things happen in our minds. And so what a wonderful and important thing it is to be right there in our nation's capital and so accessible to all. So I think it's very important that we continue to shed light upon the Holocaust. We know that World War II ended 73 years ago now. That's a long time. And so it's important not to lose the wonderful train and strand of good work and education and enlightenment that has gone on since the end of World War II in regards to the Holocaust. And so that is why this work is so important, the mobile units of death. And of course, the Institute, which with Father Desbois is associated, is doing work because incidents of religious violence and slaughter continue in our world today. And we can think of the troubled areas of the world, and so often religion is such a key factor in the violence and the persecution and the slaughter that occurs. So I do want to welcome you all here today. I thank all of the lead sponsors who have made this possible. It is something that we certainly need to be aware of. It's something that we need to keep in our minds and in our hearts. So once again, thank you so much for coming, and I am sure that this will be time well spent for us all.
Good afternoon. I'm Rabbi Albert Lewis, Rabbi Emeritus of Temple Emmanuel, and I also welcome you. And Bishop, I appreciate your welcome and I appreciate the opportunity on behalf of the Jewish community to be here. It's clear to me that Catholic-Jewish dialogue is well. It has been going on for a number of years, and each of us have worked very hard to continue that dialogue. It is deep, it is determined, and it is respected in other parts of the country. But we have become an example in West Michigan, and I hope we continue to build on that example. Much of this is the result of the work of individuals, the work of the Jewish Federation in Grand Rapids, the Cultural Council, both congregations, including Chabad, all of us working together, and certainly with Rob out at Grand Valley, to continue this type of dialogue and these types of informational opportunities. Anti-Semitism, as we just heard, is very much alive. Anti-Catholicism is very much alive. Anti-Islamic feelings are very much alive. It's not dead, but it is for us to help diminish it and to rebuild the world. We have daily proof of the hatred that exists around us. Pittsburgh yesterday is one example. The Carolinas were other examples. As Bishop has just mentioned, several more examples that are just too glaring, and it's too easy to become immune to the numbers and the incidents. That we are here today is a message, I believe, a message to ourselves, from ourselves, and from the God whom we see through multiple lenses. We stand, we pray, we work, and we are committed to repairing the world together. Our guest speaker, Father Desbois, has opened our eyes to facts too often overlooked, not only in terms of what you have unearthed with your team, but that ordinary citizens who witnessed the horror of the Holocaust bullet by bullet are themselves wounded healers. And they who witnessed and who buried within themselves have deep wounds. And intentionally or unintentionally, Father, you helped them open up, and some of them to expose their wounds and to begin to deal with their own personal losses. They are the unacknowledged victims. These are people who have tried to bury their wounds, but in doing so have had to bury parts of their very selves. And because of Father's work and research and arm twisting with some of the people on your team, they are now able, some of them more able, to express their loss, their pain, their sense of guilt, and their sense of wanting to be repentant. And so it is for us, as Jews, as Catholics, as all peoples of religion and all beliefs, to provide an opportunity in the present to give people an opportunity to repent, to relive, and then to put into the past what belongs in the past. It is for all of us to build on the decency and to appreciate the dignity of every human being. You have provided an opportunity for healing. I look forward, we all look forward to your lecture and look forward to supporting you and your work and appreciating who you are, what you do, and what you have done. May God bless you in all that you do. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Professor Rob Franciosi, and I represent Grand Valley's efforts in Holocaust studies. One snowy morning last February, I first met Marissa Reed of the Jewish Federation to discuss coordinating our efforts to bring a speaker on the Holocaust to Grand Rapids. I'm sorry Marissa could not be here today because of a family emergency. I know she would have loved to have met our guest, Father Patrick Desbois, but I also know how gratified she would be to see all of you gathered here on this gloomy, gloomy afternoon. I first met Patrick Desbois through his book, The Holocaust by Bullets, and learned about the program he spearheaded to try to locate thousands of mass graves in Eastern Europe. Let me direct you to the back of your program for just a partial list of his many impressive achievements. Note particularly that in very few years under his leadership, Yahad-In Unum has located 2,300 Nazi murder sites across Eastern Europe and interviewed 5,700 witnesses to old atrocities. Their efforts have illuminated the fates of many, many thousands of innocent victims. Thinking about his work reminded me of my own travels 2 years ago through Ukraine and Poland, cleaning a few of the neglected Jewish cemeteries that are scattered all across those blood-soaked lands. Whatever the state of disrepair we encountered, those cemeteries at least mark the final resting places of people who had once lived and loved and died in their now vanished Jewish communities. Those planned burial sites have been largely overgrown and forgotten. Yet I cannot imagine the desolation Father Desbois faced each time an elderly witness told him, "Now let me show you the place where they shot the Jews." For millions of Nazi victims, having vanished, having had their remains cast to the wind, dumped into a slow-moving Polish river, or carelessly buried in a silent Ukrainian forest, was a final offense. Their murderers were not content with killing, but labored to erase their very memory. Speaking of both aging witnesses and the hidden dead, Father Desbois once remarked, "It's like they are waiting for us. I always say to the people, finally we found you. Finally we came back." By returning to those sites, Father Desbois offers dignity to the innumerable and forgotten dead. And perhaps he retrieves just a measure of that dignity for the rest of us as well. I'm honored and humbled to give you Father Patrick Desbois, but first we are going to see a short video presentation on the work of him and his team. Thank you.
And she said, "Oh, I will show you." And she put her boot, she put her jacket, and she brought us at the end of the village, and she showed 18 small mass graves. She told me I dreamt all my life to find somebody to say what I did. She was 14 years old, Ukrainian, and the morning when the German arrived, they called 10 girls and with a spade. And she asked her mom, "Must I go?" And the mom told her, "If you don't go, we will shoot you." And so she was forced to walk on the corpse between every shooting, to pack the corpse, to make space. And she said, suddenly all my schoolmates, Jewish schoolmates arrived, and I had to walk on them. My mom came back from the market and she told us we have to suit very well because they killed the Jews this afternoon. So they were suited and they went, and she said for the first shooting we got a very good place, we saw everything. But for the second shooting we didn't get a good place. The Jewish women, before being killed, they threw their jewels because they don't want to give them to the German. And sometimes we find Magen David, wedding rings, medallion. And I say, it's the last gest that this girl did in 42, just before she was shot. And every time I find it, I say, we found you, finally we found you. I never pray because it's to respect the Jewish identity of these people, so I never make a prayer. The fact is to say, finally we found you. Me, when I go with my team, I say, don't forget the dead people are waiting for you. They wait for us since 70 years. When you were sure you were not Jew, you were not gypsy, you were not gay, you were not communist, you were not partisan, why you would be afraid? So you went to watch. People are attracted to go to watch people being killed when they think they have no risk for them. One lady, by example, she told me, I went to see all the shooting. It was 17, and she was a teenager. And I said, why did you stay to see all these shootings? And she said, it was interesting for the children. And I heard this phrase now hundreds of times, interesting for the children. I realized also that everybody could be a killer, everybody could be a victim. When I knock at a door in Russia, Ukraine, or anywhere, they open the door, and I don't know at that moment if they save Jews or kill Jews. And I would discover that in the interview. And me, when I was younger, I was thinking that the killers had awful faces, were psychotic, were monsters, and the saviors were nice people. Unfortunately, it's only one humankind. And so, everybody can be a killer, everybody can be a victim. It's why we have to teach people to say, one day we have to take responsibility. Sometimes you can think in America you are in a bubble of protection, but that's not true. There is only one planet, and it's burning in so many countries. Be aware, when it begins, it's a disease. The people who spread their disease are smart also. We are never to underestimate the enemies. It's a big mistake. When I was young, people told me, don't speak to deniers. They're old, you have not to speak with them, they will disappear. They are still old, but suddenly arrive new deniers now who are 40 years old, 45 years old, who are driving crowds of people behind themselves. So I learned, I say, what a mistake. And I say, you must stay in a fighting position. The worst would be to sleep well and to dream, because you will wake up in a nightmare. The people who saved Jews, most of them were simple people. And we had a lot of Jews who survived of France because thousands of French took risk to hide them. So me, I always say, I believe in minority. I believe in minority who stand up and carry the flag, and after we can draw people behind them. So, for example, when I teach in Georgetown or we teach in other places, I always say, one day perhaps you will be part of this minority.
Do you want the PowerPoint?
It works.
Okay, you're set. This advances.
Good evening, everybody. So it's very strange to come here and to speak about Holocaust by shootings after what happened in Pittsburgh yesterday. The first question we can raise about what we are doing is why a Catholic French priest, originally from Burgundy, who is much more well known for the wine than for Holocaust, what he is doing with 29 young persons in the killing fields of Lithuania, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, Moldavia, Romania, and now in Iraq. You know, everything began for me by a family story. My grandpa, Claudius Desbois, was deported in July 42 from France to Ukraine. We are not a Jewish family, and we are not a communist family, but he escaped from a regular camp of prisoners and he succeeded to reach France. He bought his train ticket to come back to Chalon, my city, but the woman in the train station was selling the train ticket. She was French. She phoned to Gestapo and he was deported. He came back and never accepted to speak. He had been deported in a small village called Rawaruska. It's at the border of Poland and Ukraine. And when we said Rawaruska in the family, my grandma was crying and he kept silent. So one day I spoke to him, I said, "Why don't you speak?" I said, "Perhaps you did something bad, perhaps you killed somebody." He was very upset. He told me, "No, Patrick, I was in a camp. We had no food, no drink, but outside the camp was worse than a camp." And you know, me as a child, I couldn't understand what could be worse than a camp. And in my generation, we learned nothing about Holocaust. It was not part of the movies, it was not part of the TV fiction, it was not part of the school program. My grandpa passed away, I became priest, and I went by hazard to Rawaruska. In fact, I was to prepare a pilgrimage in Czestochowa, so it has nothing to do. And I made a mistake. It was a night, it was in Soviet time, because complicated period for Poland. And I will never forget, I was completely lost. I say, "Where are we?" I asked two farmers, and they told me, "You are in Rawaruska." So in fact, I was in the village of my grandpa deportation. So in 1 minute, I would say it was a vocation in the vocation. I discovered that Holocaust was the key of my life, but I knew nothing. So I went to study in Jerusalem, in Yad Vashem, 7 times. And after I say, okay, but it didn't happen in Yad Vashem, I want to go back to Ukraine. And I knew that in the village where my grandpa has been deported, they shot 18,000 Jews, plus 25,000 Soviet prisoners, plus an unknown number of Polish partisans, plus an unknown number of gypsies. So it's minimum 45,000 people sleeping around the village in mass graves. We built a memorial for the camp of my grandpa, and we wanted to make a small memorial for the Jews, and we asked, where are the mass graves of the Jews? But you know, it was Soviet time. So when you went in the city hall with these questions, they told you, we don't know. They killed them in secret. And you know, in my village, we killed 2 Germans, and everybody knows. So I came back 4 times, 5 times in the village with only this question, where are the mass graves of the Jews? As I say, I was the nudnik of the village with only one question. Finally, the Soviets lost the power and a new mayor was elected. He brought me in the forest with 50 farmers of the village who were present at the killing. I will never forget that day. They were gathered in the forest, and behind was an empty pit, And they came one after one to speak. The first one, his name was Martin. He said, I was alone with my mom and a cow, and suddenly we saw a German coming and turning with his motorcycle. And everybody was wondering why. Why do they send one German? Finally, now we know. 2-3 days before the shooting, they send an architect. He is in charge to dig the mass grave. So he goes to the city hall, he asks how many Jews are still alive, and he will calculate the volume of the mass grave according to the number of people they want to kill. You must understand there are two kinds of mass grave for German units. Mass grave they shoot from the top and they fall down. Mass grave they force the Jews to go down on the ground. It's called Sardinenpackung. Effectively, the day after arrived 3 Germans with 30 Jews in a truck, and they forced the Jews to dig. You know, the farmers who speak to us are not historians, are not academic people, they are simple farmers, poor people most of the time. And they told us the Germans began to be buried during the digging. So they asked for a table, and they put a gramophone, and they listened German music. And one, he was playing harmonica, and he broke his harmonica. And later, with metallic detector, we found the pieces of German harmonica. And after they said to the Jews, you should rest. So the Jews went out and sat on the grass, but secretly, a policeman went down and he put explosives under the ground. After half an hour, they said to the Jews, go on digging, and the 30 Jews exploded. At that moment, another lady called Maria came and she told me, the German came in my farm and told me, come, come. And she had to climb in the trees and pick up the pieces of corpse of the Jews and hide them with branches so that the next Jew will not see it. You know, it was very difficult to hear that because in Soviet Union, people were used to speak with very rough way. They say the leg of a woman was here, the hand was there. I was not ready. I had no camera. I was alone with the mayor. And after they said that they brought trucks and trucks and trucks of Jews, in 1 day and a half, they shot exactly 1,500 Jews with 2 shooters, with carabine Mausers, and 3 pushers. Why pushers? Because army was not so happy of the shooting of the Jews because of the lack of ammunition. So it was 1 bullet, 1 Jew, 1 Jew, 1 bullet, not more. So if somebody was injured, or baby, or too old, he was pushed and buried alive. And after, in every village of Ukraine, of Russia, of Belarus, they told us it took 3 days the mass grave to die. I will never forget there was somebody young, too young, and I asked him, don't tell me you were also at the shooting. He told me, yes, I was at the shooting. I said, how old you were? He told me, I was 5 years old. He said, you know, there was a table and the carabines, but there was also a big box of candies. So on one side they were shooting, on the other side they made a distribution of candies to the children. So I went back and forth to the table. That was also a double shock. I realized Holocaust of the Jews, or shooting of gypsies or others, were public. People went to watch. I will never forget, I interviewed the lady in Moldavia, and she told me, the director of the school told us tomorrow no class, because we kill our enemies. And she said, we were 37, early in the morning we ran to the mass grave. We arrived too early. There were no Jew and no German. And we sat under a tree, and suddenly they arrived. And she told me, I cried so much. And I asked, did you stay the full day? She told me, yes. So I said, why did you stay the full day if you cried? And she told me this phrase you heard in the small movie. She told me, you know, it was interesting for us, the children. So when you work about a genocide on the ground, on forensic studies, you learn a lot about humanity. A lot. Because, you know, when you begin this kind of investigation, began in Ukraine, you have a lot of testimonies of people very near from the crime. So the tendency of people say bad Ukrainian. After you work in Poland, people have the tendency to say bad Polish. After they go to Lithuania, say bad Lithuanian. After you go to Russia, you don't say bad Russian because you lose your visa. But, and after now I work in Iraq to investigate about ISIS, there is no Polish, no Ukrainian, no German, no Lithuanian. It's a human disease. This disease, I would say, is spreading when suddenly begins the hate against one group, and after it legalizes the killers. So I will explain you what we found after 15 years. It was to unmask the killers. The German killers has a methodology. They are choosing who will be killer tomorrow. You will be shooting. You could be shooter one day, you could be cooker the day after. When the Germans, they know they will shoot, they drink. Because tomorrow they have to wake up at 4 o'clock and to drive in the night to the village. But before, they phone to the village to prepare the mass grave. So they phone to this architect to prepare everything. During the night before the shooting, it's a nightmare for the Jews. The ghetto is fenced, and it's the last night that the neighbors or the German can take advantage of the Jews. So in the morning, the policemen who go out of the ghetto say, I could rape 2 girls, I could rape 3 girls, I could rape 4 girls. It was difficult, even because I wrote a second book more recently called In Broad Daylight, and it was difficult to write the chapter about the rape. For the respect of the people, but at the end I say, we have to say that. When we began to find that they raped people in the ghetto, I remember many historians were yelling, telling me no German would have dared to touch a Jew. But in fact, we found a secret document of Himmler say it's legal on the Soviet territory to rape Jewish girls because the war is too tough. So when the Germans arrive in the morning, they arrive at 6. They meet the police, they meet the diggers, and they meet the cooker because they want to eat in time. They want to eat at noon. I interviewed the 3 ladies who were cooking for the German. And after, they make an announcement to the Jews, today you will be deported to Palestine. Don't worry, take your belongings and gather in the main street, 5 per 5. And so, you know, it was deportation. Most of these people were living under Stalin. Deportation have been very strong the years before. It was not a good news, but it was part of what could happen. Most of the Jews take their monies, their jewels, their watches, and they make a long line. And suddenly, an official arrives and says, direction Palestine. You know, the trick of the German was to dig the mass grave not far from the train station, so that the Jews really think they go to the train station. I will give you an example in Babi Yar, that is well known in Kiev. Among 35,000 victims, 10,000 went to the train station, thinking they had to take the train. And Germans say, oh, they believe it, we have to bring them back. So they walk, and suddenly, German says, links rechts, it's finished, no more train station. So at that moment, the Jewish women take their jewels and throw them away. It's why us, with metallic detector, we can find sometimes 10, 20 wedding rings near a mass grave. It's very moving because it's the last gest that this girl could do. It could be also a medallion, it could be a Magen David, a star. And after they make them sit on the ground and undress their warm coats. Why the warm coats? Because inside the warm coats were the money, the belongings, the jewels. And after they isolate them 5 per 5 or 10 per 10 to go to the mass grave. Why 5? If there are 5 shooters, 1 bullet, 1 Jew. Why 10? If there are 10 shooters, 1 bullet, 1 Jew. Just after the shooting, they are buried, dead or alive. And the clothes are taken on cart and horses and brought back to the school and will be sold by auctions. And after, all the belonging of the Jews will be also taken, sold by auctions. It means, I remember many people said after 3 days we were all suited in Jew. These killings took place since the beginning of the war against Soviet Union. It means June 41 until 44. So I would like to raise a question, an important question. Altogether, we estimate they shot more than 2.2 million Jews, plus the gypsies, plus the others. And strangely, so there are 2 times more victims by shooting than in Auschwitz. Why people remember Auschwitz was secret and don't remember the shootings were public and advertised, and with also pictures. I don't know. What I know is that people are afraid of mass graves. It's very difficult. I will never forget, I was in a meeting with a friend from Poland, a Catholic high-level personality. It was a long time ago. And he told me, Patrick, Hitler made a mistake. I said, which mistake? He told me he built Auschwitz. And I asked him, why for you it's a mistake? He told me, because the Jews are coming back. When they kill them in forests, they never came back. And that's true. That's true that on the biggest mass grave I found is 45,000 people in one place. And nobody comes back. There is a small stone, and that's it. And it's sure that nobody rebuilt an Auschwitz. No Auschwitz in Rwanda, no Auschwitz in Darfur, no Auschwitz in Cambodia, no Auschwitz under Bashar al-Assad, no Auschwitz under ISIS, and nobody is even thinking making an Auschwitz because you will have immediately pictures, satellite, souvenir, barbed wires, etc., and all the planet will burn. But if you kill, like Bashar, 500,000 people by shooting, bombing, cutting the throat, people in mass graves, no trace, even if it's public. Me, I think that unconsciously we are afraid of mass graves. I will never forget, I was in Mosul, in Iraq. It was recently liberated, and we were trying to see desecration of church and so on. And suddenly I saw a pit with stones around. I said, what is it? He told me, 34 people. And after another pit, he told me 18. And he said, I think my building fell down, it's 84 people under. A mass grave is a complete neantification of human beings. And people don't pay attention. And I would say in all our countries, long time ago, we made mass graves. I always give this example. Me, I love animals. And I was in Costa Rica a long time ago visiting a reservation of parrots. And I asked to the guide, because we work in Guatemala, so I know very well Guatemala because we opened the first Holocaust museum in Central America in Guatemala. I asked to the guide, in Costa Rica is beautiful, there are beautiful butterflies, there are crocodiles, monkeys, but there is no Native American, there is no indigenous. He told me because we killed them long time ago. I said, but where are the mass graves? Oh, he told me it's not the same tour as the parrots. So we found another way, and suddenly he showed me mass graves of indigenous. And I said, now I understand why in Guatemala there are 68% of indigenous, and in Costa Rica nearly 0. So I would say unconsciously, I think we are afraid of that. And the fact that the Jews today are coming back to the mass grave, to their mass graves, because now many families write to us from Paris, from America, from Israel, from Australia to ask, in which mass grave is my grandma? In which mass grave is my uncle? in which mass grave is the rabbi, and they go and they say Kaddish, they pray for the first time since 42. And I would say the Jewish people would be the first one in history to come back to their mass graves. It's like an anthropological revolution, I would say, in humanity, because normally when you put people in mass graves, nobody comes back. It's frightening, more than a camp. So I would say, why do we do that? And what to teach today to the new generation? I'm professor in Georgetown, but I have a friend of mine, he's teaching in Sorbonne, and we teach also in Germany, and we have also week of teaching in Denver, in Cincinnati, for professors of high school. I think we have now to be careful. The young generation, my students are like 20 years old. It's not their story of their father, not story of their grandpa, but of their grandpa. So think of you, what interesting for you for story of grandpa. Me, by example, one of my grandpa has been killed in the First World War. It's far away. So we try to teach not only to grandpa's story, but to teach them as a crime. Me, what I teach, when I teach Holocaust, I show them pictures of archives. I say, do you think it's a real picture? Is it a professional picture or a souvenir? How do you see it? Who is in the picture, etc.? After I show a piece of archives, etc., and after I say, what happened according to you in the village? Are you sure? Do you have enough evidence? So I try to teach them, to train them as investigators to make their own mind about the crimes done during Holocaust. And I would say we have more and more students. And every year, we make a travel with them. We bring them in one country where we have mass graves. Last year, we were in Moldavia in Auschwitz. 2 years ago, we were in Belarus and Auschwitz. And 3 years ago in Ukraine. And this year, we'll come back in Ukraine. And I would say a big part of my students are changing their life. When they begin to Georgetown, they want to have good life, good job. And after they realize they have also to spend their life healing the planet. I ask to my students who are not Jews, why do you come to my course? It's so difficult course. They say because we know that people are copying Holocaust today to make mass crimes. And I would say, after this terrible day of Pittsburgh, you must know that in France, we had many Pittsburgh in many places during the last 5 years, the last 10 years. We don't have a year without a killing of Jews. We don't now have a week, a month, without an attack against Jews anywhere. We had also a killing of a priest in his parish. During the feast, even Cathedral Notre Dame now is protected with militaries. So I would say we are in a new period. Either we try to make a life with pink glasses, we think of nothing, we make our life and we don't see it's burning. Either we begin to think it's burning. Me, I work a lot in Iraq, I work a lot in Europe. When I see what happened in Pittsburgh, it remembers me 10 years ago when they killed the first Jew. It was a young Jew. They trapped him with a girl, and after he was tortured during weeks and left dying in the street, and he died. 10 years ago, we were 15,000 French in the street. All the government was there, all the opposition, even the Cardinal of Paris was there. Today, if they kill a Jew, you can barely have a small demonstration in the street. Time has gone, violence is nearly everywhere. So I would say, try not to sleep too long time. Pittsburgh was yesterday. For the people who are in hate groups of different ideology, sometimes they copy each other. For them, yesterday, it was a big success.
One guy succeeded to kill 11 people and to be in all the TV of the planet. I can tell you in my country, in Europe, they copy each other. When one is succeeding, we are wondering where will be the next one. All these people want to be heroes in the TV. They don't care to be condemned to death. They want to show they dominate the planet. Perhaps you will say, oh, after the conference of Father Desbois, we didn't sleep well. And I say always, I work only with people who don't sleep well. So if any of you wants to know what we are doing, I am easy to see on Facebook. My organization is on Facebook. We have also a website, and you can join us, volunteering or supporting, because we need to finish the job. But we need first to educate, because a new generation must wake up to keep the planet. We know that the majorities like to sleep in every country. Even during the war, the majority wants to sleep. But when there are a minority who wakes up, we can be full of hope. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Any question is possible.
So does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
On the back. Wait for the microphone. Yeah.
Did you find that wherever you went, that there was some assistance by the local population in assisting the Nazis?
Yeah, I always receive this question. Yes and no. You must understand, I work mainly in Soviet Union, in post-Soviet Union, so people were not free. So when the Germans needed 700 farmers to dig, they didn't care if these people were pro-Jew, anti-Jew. They went to the city hall, and these people were convocated to work. Collective work was an obligation under Stalin. If you didn't work for collectivity, you were killed. So the Germans used mainly the Soviet system to have workers for free. But I would say in any country, when you make a genocide, you never miss workers. Because people can get belongings, can get the girls, can get the house. So it's not only pure anti-Semitism. As I said, you must never forget that when the SS or other groups arrested a group of Jews, they never forgot the belongings. I never saw a family who say, oh, we kill the Jews, but we are a non-profit, we take nothing. No, no, no. The SS were not a non-profit. So I say that because when you accept to say to people, you can kill your neighbors, but you will also get the house and the money and the girls, you will never miss workers. So it's complicated to identify the motivation, but I would say also in Iraq, they had always, ISIS also work with the neighbors. You cannot make a genocide without the neighbors. It's impossible. The way is to motivate them. Yeah?
Ray, here's the microphone.
In terms of a message for us for today, you know, some see in this country and around the world this creeping fascism, if you will, that can eventually result in the horrors like were experienced in Nazi Germany. But then, you know, on the other side, there's arguably a creeping communism, socialism that can also result in some really nasty horrors when they go too extreme. Is it the goal here to just keep the pendulum from swinging too far in either direction and live in a a relatively happy middle ground, or how do you see it ideologically, I guess, is what I'm asking.
I rarely treat the subject at this level. I really stay on the ground. I would say the first thing is to teach to the young people, be careful when you begin to hate a group. Be careful when hate is coming inside and that groups are proposing you to have an overpower of domination. Secondly, I would say the problem is not to make an analysis, it's to fight the evil. And I would say also there are actually many victims of genocide. Me, I work in Iraq, by example. When it was full news about ISIS, there were TVs everywhere about the Christian, about the Yazidi, of that. When the TVs went out, nobody cares anymore, and the victims are still there. So I would say also we must open our heart. An orphan in a camp is $35 per month. So I say anybody today can help against the genocide, because with the social media, with internet, we can really open our heart. Otherwise, I think we learned nothing. Because the genocide today, it's not an ideology, it's something who happened. Me, I work with the Yazidi in Iraq. There are 22 camps of Yazidi. Each camp is 15,000 people. And now that the media went, nobody cares. They gave the Nobel Prize to a Yazidi, but don't think the planet is caring for them. So I would say, me, I have chosen not to go too high in analysis, but to act. You know, my grandma was hiding refugees all the world. She was deeply Catholic. She was not a great thinker. If I ask my grandma what she thinks about ideology, communism, she told me, no, the problem was to hide them, and we have been denounced by the neighbors, and the German came. I stay at this level.